Okay, so I'm going to talk about the musical 1776. Came out in the spring of 1969, comedy musical, later made to a movie, about the founding of America and the writing of the Declaration of Independence. And I'm going to be quoting extensively from Harbert's article, Ever to the Right. So our setting is the Nixon era, 1969 to 74. The country is severely divided on issues such as the Vietnam War and civil rights, conservatives versus liberals, all sorts of things. Alyssa Harbert describes this time as being tormented by intense separation and mistrust between the younger and older generations. So, given these political and generational divides of the time, how did this musical come to be one of the most successful musicals ever written about American history? But when it opened in 1969, people on all points of the political spectrum embraced it, from the anti establishment New Left hippies to right wing pro Vietnam War Republicans and many in between. How could this have happened? Now, the core creative team were all left-leaning Democrats, and they all wanted to invest 1776 with their own, beliefs about, they wanted it to do something for the people. Sherman Edwards, he first conceived the idea. He was a former school teacher, so for him, the work's purpose was to educate the public about the drafting and ratification of the Declaration of Independence. Peter Stone, on the other hand, who was in the middle, wanted to make specific connections between the past and present, quote, to use the past to make sense of the turmoil of their own time. Stuart Osrow, not pictured here, wanted to use the popularity of 1776 to spark social change and activism. So that's here kind of the setting where the people who created this are coming from. The use of the American Revolution allowed the 1776 to become an ideological mirror for audience members to see a reflection of their own values in the story. So I'm going to get into what I mean by that. Historian Andrew Schuckett describes two ways Americans tend to view the American Revolution: essentialist and organicist. So essentialists believe in the American Revolution, it's this past event, it happened, and it relies on the assumption, here's a quote, that there was one American Revolution led by demigods, resulting in an inspired governmental structure, and straying from our legacy would be result in the nation's ruin. Very dramatic quote, but the idea is it was in the past, it happened, and it was great. Organicists believe, quote, Americans are ever in the process of trying to complete a revolution that the founders left unfinished, and they see themselves furthering the never-ending task of perfecting the Union. So it's finished, it's in the past, and we draw strength from this story versus it's still happening. When 1776 was performed at the White House, Nixon asked that they take out Cool, Cool, Considerate Men, Mama Look Sharp, and Molasses to Rum, anti-conservative, anti-war, and anti-race hypocrisy, respectfully, each of those songs. So in Cool, Considerate Men, a loyalist in Pennsylvania cautions the other conservative loyalists to maybe think before they vote on independence because it could impact their privileged lifestyles. It offended Nixon because it's anti-conservative. Why did the conservatives of the time not mind it? Well, they didn't identify with the loyalists, they identified with the patriots. So once again, both sides of the spectrum, conservative and liberal, weren't offended by it. They could find what they valued in it. They were the patriots, right? So that's that song. The next song is Mama Look Sharp. A young soldier sings a song from a dead soldier's point of view, asking his mother to find his body. Conservatives saw it more as a hymn of respect to the fallen soldier, whereas liberals saw it as the condemnation of war. So once again, both sides of the spectrum. Molasses to Rum is seen by conservatives as anti-slavery, right? He's talking about the triangle trade. But John Adams can't look Rutledge in the eye during the entire song because Rutledge is not calling him out on slavery. He's calling him out on
economy. Always economy. There's more to this than a filthy purse string, Rutledge. It's an offense against man and God.
It's a stinking business, Mr. Rutledge. A stinking business.
Is it really, Mr. Hopkins? Then what's that I smell floating down from the north? Could it be the aroma of hypocrisy? For who holds the other end of that filthy purse string, Mr. Adams?
The real message of this song is the hypocrisy of the North, condemning slavery, condemning the South, but they held the other end of that purse string. So conservatives saw no trouble with this song. We're anti-slavery too, but the song is really anti-race hypocrisy. So because the setting of 76 is historical, the musical could function as a mirror confirming the political beliefs each individual expected to see. both Republican politicians and young radical activists could believe it championed their own values. So this musical was a platform for commentary on problems facing the United States, Vietnam War, class, racial history, the purpose and nature of political revolution. Whether people saw it as being only about the Revolutionary Era or as commentary on contemporary issues, they could feel that it portrayed what made them the proudest in American culture. Thank you. Woo!
Okay, we have some time for questions. Yeah, Preston?
So obviously you didn't mention Hamilton directly, but we talked all around it. So my question is, Hamilton?
Yes, I actually read this article that I based this whole presentation on for my Hamilton hip hop and musical theater class. And so is talking about the connections. And I think President Obama had a quote, it's at the end of this article saying, the only thing me and Dick Cheney can agree on is Hamilton. So Hamilton, people have said, is also that musical because it uses the past. People across the political spectrum love Hamilton, and it's because what it's portraying, you could kind of see whatever you want to see in it.
That's very interesting. I had honestly expected you to say something different because I know from my experience, my stepdad will never, ever go see Hamilton for reasons that he either can't name or realizes that he probably shouldn't. And so I thought I thought you're actually going to say it's different and here's why. So I'm delighted that it seems to be, at least for some people, the same, but I was hoping for more of an explanation of why it might be different.
I can only say in a lot of the readings I've done, I think the general consensus, especially when it came out, was that it was generally liked across the board.
Do we have more questions? Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah, I figured out how to raise my hand as a host. Nice. So my question, I guess, is sort of along the same lines. Whereas, we're both Hamilton and 1776 have such widespread appeal, with maybe some exceptions. Do you think that 1776 was designed with that objective in mind, or was that kind of just a happy circumstance? And is this something, maybe is there a method to this that has been used all throughout theater history and I just completely oblivious because I'm oblivious? Or is this really, really clever for this particular approach?
From what I read, based on what the three founders have said, because the article is quoting from, like, he's not just pulling this out of the air that the founders intended this. Sorry, founders. Three people who made the musical. They had these ideas, and they were kind of what I said. And I think that the writer of this article was saying, hey, I think the reason that people weren't offended by it and it was so broadly appealed was because of the historical nature. People could see what they wanted to see. They could identify with who they wanted to identify with. I think you had another part of the question, and I forgot what it was.
Well, I'm wondering if, I mean, you know a ton about music and theater and history, and I'm wondering, is that a common, is it part of the design of art to try to make it have that kind of broad appeal, intentionally or unintentionally, or does that just happen to be a side effect, or maybe we only know about the things that had broad appeal because they stuck around because everybody seemed to like them? Maybe we missed out on all the stuff that was really offensive to a lot of people.
Yeah, I can answer this question. The first way I'll answer with my own personal opinion, which is kind of what you said. I think that a lot of it is just you do something and it succeeds, and then everyone else quickly says, okay, what made it succeed? And let's see if we can repeat it. The other thing I'm going to say is when I was researching Lin-Manuel Miranda's, Hamilton, it's not quite like, oh, I picked this historical thing in order to, so it would appeal to liberals and conservatives. But it was like, here's this story that we all share, this, legend, this mythology, and we're putting a new face on it, or we're saying, this is our history too, which isn't quite the same thing, but it seemed related, so I thought I'd stick it in there.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, Chaz?
I have a related thought. I don't know if that's the appropriate thing to share. Well, sorry. Generally, things that have wide appeal are stories that are well told. And based on that, 17 and Hamilton constructed well stories, basically. And because of that, they appeal to many listeners because the structure of a good story tends to match the structure of life experiences that people can then overlay their experiences onto.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Aaron,
Thanks. Have there been anything related to 1776 that six? Maybe it's the production or the writing or any of that that you either found in your research or just have been thinking about related to what's happening currently right now.
I definitely think a lot of these issues that faced America in this time are still facing us, just in different ways. We don't have the Vietnam War, but there's still, like, as a millennial, I can say I'm still feeling, 2001 and the never-ending war going on now. So it's almost, because thinking how long Vietnam went on, right? So civil rights, class stuff, conservatives versus liberals. Yeah, I'm kind of seeing a lot of similarities.
With the sorry, can I ask a follow-up question?
yeah, we got about a minute left.
Okay, so this is cheating because I kind of know that you recently did this in Rad, but the conservatives versus liberals idea, with what you were talking about in the musical itself, does any of that, like the way that your brain is, the way that your mind is different, does any of that play into any of the musical stuff that you were talking about with conservatives versus liberals?
You have to be more specific about musical stuff. Hamilton particular, or all musicals, or?
I was thinking 1776, but it could be Hamilton. With what you were your research article discussion.
Oh yeah, it was a very interesting Rad article about what people associate conservatives with and what people associate liberals with, and the article was like, actually it's this kind of a spectrum, and a lot of what people thought was kind of true, but then some of this wasn't true. It was a quantitative article, so it was mostly numbers, not a lot of making comments on what it could mean. Very interesting. I'm not so good with quantitative articles, so so I don't have anything. I'm sorry, I don't have anything.
But basically, like when you were doing, like, talking about this and how liberals and conservatives related to each other in the musical, and then about it afterwards.
Oh, the loyalists versus the patriots.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Okay, so the loyalists, and the song is very explicit. If you look at the lyrics, cool, cool, considerate men, ever to the right, never to the left. It's so funny. When I was a child, I thought it was so boring, and now I'm an adult and I get it. But it's definitely, if you look at the lyrics, it's very clearly talking about conservative values of keeping your privilege and not, yeah, maybe this thing could make things better, but we gotta, keep our fancy lifestyles, and we're, we don't get, I don't know. It's one of those things where if you see the song, it's like, this is a lot of conservative values of conservation, I guess. And then the patriots are, the, freedom and stuff. So the conservatives of the time saw themselves as, yeah, we are patriots and fighting for America's freedom. They didn't identify at all with England loving loyalists who were about property. But the writers definitely meant for the loyalists to be the conservatives.
Very interesting. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yay.